This is Your City Could Be Better, because it could be. I'm David Plotz. If you love your city and still complain about it, you're in the right place. In an early episode of the HBO TV show Hacks, which is set in Las Vegas, there's a key sequence involving a visit by a water inspector to the main character, Deborah Vance. So there's a water inspector who shows up to examine whether Deborah Vance is using too much water. A water inspector, a water cop. This was a revelation for me, but it turns out that Las Vegas probably has the most robust system for saving, recycling, reusing, and preserving water of any American city, in part because it has water cops, among other things. And paradoxically, this driest of American cities in America's enormous western desert is also the most water secure city in the desert Southwest. So I'm joined by CityCast Las Vegas host Jesse Merrick to ask the question today: would your city be better with Vegas-like water strategies? Jesse Merrick, welcome to Your City Could Be Better.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're new to CityCast, so we're putting you on the hot seat here.
I know, I like it.
But you're from Vegas, so the hot seat is you're probably like cool on the hot seat.
Yeah, this is just like normal for us. 100 degrees is like nothing. So this hot seat's kind of cool for me.
So what is a water cop? What do they do? When might you get a visit from a water cop? And can you be punished? Can you go to water prison for water crimes?
Well, there is no water prison as far as I know. But yes, they are water cops. Technically, they're called water waste investigators. And essentially what they do is they cruise around town looking for instances of water waste. And then, they go and will place like a little flag next to wherever that is, letting you know that like you've kind of been cited or warned. And initially it starts, with a warning first, but then can start with a fine as well after that of $80 and then go all the way up to $1,280 as well. So there's a big gap and it just doubles each and every time if you don't fix it, essentially. And so it also, too, the other thing that's kind of interesting is like you can rat on somebody for water waste violations, too. Like you can go on the Las Vegas Valley Water District's website and like report people. So I just imagine, I've never had this happen to me, but I imagine, whoever, runs the HOA or whatever doesn't like their neighbor jumps on there and be like, Cindy's been wasting water.
Do people get resentful if they see their neighbors using too much water?
Some people do. I mean, personally, I've never run into that situation. I have let my lawn die. So I'm doing my part to help with water, saviors and things like that. But no, it's not necessarily like, oh, I can't believe you're wasting water. Like it's not that ingrained in us. But it is one of those things where like we are all very, aware of the fact that we're in the desert. And so you see visually like, hey, there's not a ton of water around on a daily basis. And you hear about it in the news all the time, too, about our water resources and stuff. So I personally am like, hey, how can I save water? But I don't think it's one of those things where it's like wars within the neighborhood of people trying to be like, you better make sure you conserve water.
So where does Vegas get its water anyway? You're a metro area of more than 2 million people, 2.4 million people. And when I think of Vegas, it's like, there's not really water. So where do you
it's a desert.
Get any water?
Yeah. So surprisingly, we actually get 90% of our water from the Colorado River via Lake Mead. And many people don't know this. I didn't even realize it until I started researching for a lot of this, was that Lake Mead is actually the largest reservoir in the U.S. So we've got this massive body of water, I would say probably about 20 miles or so from like the center of our city. And that's where we get most of it from. The other 10% comes from like groundwater resources, that we have in an aquifer beneath Las Vegas.
So the reason we wanted to do this episode is this incredible stat, which is that basically all indoor water in Las Vegas is recycled and reused. So What does that mean practically? Does that mean like if I'm coming to Las Vegas that I'm basically drinking what used to be toilet water? Is that what it means?
Technically, yes, which I know sounds so disgusting.
It's okay.
You're drinking toilet water. You're even, to put it in perspective, drinking water that at one point was in a pool down on the Strip. Think about the unmentionable stuff that happens at those pool parties.
Oh, gosh.
Technically, You're drinking it, but it's a really robust system of filtration that goes into it, before you end up drinking it again, So it goes from your home, as long as it goes down the drain, about 99% of that water is recycled. It then gets sent to a treatment facility. From the treatment facility, it goes through this insane process of mechanical, biological, and chemical treatments. and then gets sent out into nature through a wash that runs 12 miles along a river into Lake Mead, where then it sits there, kind of goes through its own filtration process in Lake Mead, and then is sucked back into the system, sent through another treatment facility, and then again purified again before it ends up back in your home or wherever it is. So it is kind of one of those deals where it's weird when you're drinking your water. Lately, it's been more top of mind where I'm like, at some point, this was probably in someone's toilet, but it goes through such an insane process to make sure that it's ready to roll. And one other thing I want to make sure to note too, we don't do what's called direct potable reuse, which some people call toilet to tap, which is where they eliminate, our environmental buffer that we have that is the Las Vegas wash where that water runs through. So we are going through an extra step where nature is also cleaning our water too.
That's interesting. So let's talk about some of the things that you all are doing, that Vegas is doing to preserve and to save water and to encourage you, Jesse, and your neighbors to preserve and save water. So they're different categories. So I want to talk about things that you can do at your home. So what are the things that Las Vegas encourages, demands, nudges you to do at your home to save water?
Yeah, so to get into that, I'll first start with kind of what they don't do, which is one of those things that was hard for me to wrap my head around at first, is that like indoors, there's not really much of a worry of like quote unquote water waste, because as long as it goes down a drain, it's being recycled. So the thing that the Southern Nevada Water Authority loves to throw out there is that if they were to turn on every faucet and flush every toilet down on the strip and do that every single day, 365 days a year, there would be no, difference in terms of the water that, we're taking out of Lake Mead or bringing in just because it gets recycled, which I think is just fascinating when you sit there and think about that.
Yeah. When I did not think of it in those terms.
It's
okay.
Crazy.
So basically indoor, you do whatever. You take an hour-long shower, no worries. Okay.
Yeah. So outdoors is the big thing. That's really what they concentrate on. And the number one thing that is like attacked as far as like water waste or water usage is landscaping. That's the top thing that they really go after.
And what does that mean? No grass?
Yeah. So essentially, like they have this war on grass kind of, or at least non-functional grass, where they're going after people's front lawns. Your backyard isn't something they attack, but they try and incentivize people to get rid of their front lawns just because lawns use so much water. So they're encouraging like xeriscaping or even, turf installation and stuff like that. And in order to do that, they're giving people money to rip out their grass, which I think is kind of cool. They're paying anywhere from $5 to $7 per square foot to have people remove their grass. And the reason why they're going after grass is because it actually does like demand a lot of water. When you look at it, for every square foot of grass that you have, it requires 73 gallons of water a year, which, to put that kind of into a visual for you, if you imagined a column of water that was 10 feet tall, in each square foot, that's a basketball hoop size column of water that each square foot of grass requires over the course of a year to water. Conversely, like drip irrigated trees or, water smart landscaping as a whole only uses 18 gallons of water, which is a 3-foot tall column. So it's a massive difference over the course of the year, especially when you add it up, throughout, the whole time of all the different places around town where they get rid of that non-functional grass.
Okay. What about things like you washing your car or a pool?
Yeah, so the car one's interesting. This one to me was kind of funny because, initially they were like, okay, you're not allowed to wash your car outside, because that water goes out into the street and doesn't go down a gutter or a drain or anything like that to where it can be recycled. So it's lost to evaporation. But a lot of people that have like classic cars and things like that, like kind of said, we're like, hey, no, like this is something we enjoy doing. We want to be able to wash our cars at home. So they were like, okay, you can now wash your car, or at least each car, one time per week, as long as you have like a shutoff nozzle on your hose. So that's one of the requirements. But we talked about the incentive program that they have for people ripping out the grass. They also give out coupons for people to go to like a commercial car wash, because what happens when you go to a commercial car wash? That water all goes down a drain. And as we talked about before, that water gets recycled. So guess what? Now you're drinking recycled car wash water as well.
Yeah. What about a pool?
Yeah, with the pools, it's interesting. So that's the thing is like in the in the times when you're not using the pool the most, the non-summer months, they say go ahead and throw like a pool cover over it. That's one of the big things because that'll help with, evaporation and things like that. In the summer months, there's not a whole lot you can do because obviously they said that even throwing a pool cover over it in the summer months when we hit like 100+ degrees, that's actually going to make it even hotter. So it'll evaporate even faster. But like, let's say you're, emptying out your pool, doing the maintenance on it and stuff like that. they want you to make sure that that gets drained into, again, another drain that'll go back into the system and be recycled. And at many of the homes here, even my home, it was built in 1960, I have like a water port that you could go into. I don't have a pool, but if I did have a pool, I could drain it into that water port so that it then does get recycled.
So it does. So you still lose whatever you lose to evaporation, but when you are emptying it, at least that stays.
Yeah. And evaporation is a thing that they just understand. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. Because, again, like, we are in the desert. One of the crazy things that I found in the research was that over at Lake Mead, just in terms of evaporation alone, they lose 600,000 acre feet per year to evaporation, which is a crazy number to wrap your head around.
I cannot let this pass without talking about the Bellagio and also about golf courses. So the notable experience that one has when you go to Vegas is there are a lot of pools where people are hanging out and drinking. There is a Bellagio fountain, which is just like spraying water in 112 degree heat. And then there are golf courses. So how do those fit in this quite tight-fisted water ecosystem?
So we'll start with the Bellagio because that is the easy one to wonder. I've oftentimes been like, what the heck's going on? But the interesting thing about the Bellagio is they don't use any water from the Colorado River or from Lake Mead. They actually have their own private well underneath the property. And a lot of casinos actually do have them on the Strip. If they were built before 1971, they all have their private well water that they can access.
Well, now, they're just pumping out, they're pumping out the aquifer then.
Yes, which is also an issue. Like, we can't ignore that for sure. But the thing is like they're at least not using our quote unquote water for the fountain because that's going to get evaporated, you know? And I think the way that the Southern Nevada Water Authority approaches the Strip and pools and things like that, as you've noted, because look, that many pools that they have down there, like evaporation is going to be a big issue. But the way they go about discussing that is kind of saying, well, okay, look at the pools on the Strip and how many people they service. We get 38 to 40 million visitors every year versus the pools in your backyard. What are you going to have 50 people over in a year that use it? And also too, taking into account like what the Strip generates for us. You know, think of a world of hurt that we would be in if you got rid of all the pools on the Strip. Nobody's going to come here, you know, except for the degenerate gamblers only. And then we'd be in trouble. So for that, they're willing to kind of overlook some of those things. But in terms of the golf courses that you asked about before, they're on what's called a water budget. So they kind of can pick and choose when they increase or decrease their usage as long as they're within that budget. And they too have stepped in and gotten a lot of the non-essential turf, you know, when it's not on the fairways and things like that. They'll put in, you know, the different grass turf and things like that. So they've taken a lot of grass off as well.
You guys have a water authority. They're always advertising with CityCast. The water authority is clearly like a big government agency in the way it isn't in most cities. What do they do in terms of policy, in terms of messaging, and then in terms of actual billing to discourage water use or control water use?
Yeah, so the big one are those water cops. But one thing I remember, I moved to Las Vegas in 2019, and it was so funny to me, and because I'll never forget this. Sit at home watching TV, and there's a commercial from the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and Ryan Reeves, who used to be kind of like the enforcer for the Golden Knights, he's in these commercials delivering what they called reality
as the enforcer?
checks. Yeah, and he's literally, it's like videos of like people at home watering their lawn or their sprinklers are running when they shouldn't be, and he comes flying in and checks them into the side of the building or through a glass window or whatever, and he screams, reality check, make sure you set your water clocks and stuff. And so that's kind of what he's doing. And what the water clock thing is that like they set limits on when and for how long you can water your lawns here if you do have lawns. And so like in the summer, you're allotted 6 days. You can never water on Sundays. That's a year-round thing. And it can't be between, I think, 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. because that's when, evaporation is going to be at its highest. And then in the spring and fall, it turns down to 3 days a week that you can water. And then in the winter, 1 day per week. So that's kind of like the policies that they put in place on it.
Okay, that makes sense. But do they then charge very high water bills? Because you've said earlier, like actually your indoor water use, they don't care really. They care. I mean, they don't. Presumably they care a little bit, but if that water's getting wasted, do they charge you a lot of money for your indoor water use? Do they meter your outdoor water use? Are your water bills higher than my water bills?
I don't believe so. That's not something I have noticed since I've moved here from anywhere else that I've lived. And that's something that they say they don't necessarily impose like higher, per use things. Like here in Southern Nevada, there's something going on with our electric company, that is, where they're looking at, high usage rates and how that would multiply and things like that. With the water authority, they don't do anything like that. But again, that's where the water fines come into play and the water cops making sure that you're not using it, in a wasteful way.
Have you ever been water fined?
I haven't. And it's funny because I actually had a really gnarly leak. Like I said, my home was built in 1960. I had a leak in the front yard that I didn't know about for quite a while. And they'll like text you or email you. But I got the text and I was like, I don't see any water. Like there's nothing. So I ignored it. And then I ignored it again for another week. And then all of a sudden water starts bubbling up in the front yard. And it was crazy too, because I had just quit my job to go start a media company of my own. And then I get hit with this like couple $1,000 water bill. And I was like, good God. But luckily,
is that why
you
took
systems.
A job with us? You took a job with us.
That's why I joined CityCast.
Oh my God, exactly. I cannot pay my water bill.
Yeah. But the cool thing is they work with you. Like they have programs in place too, because they know like it's expensive for plumbing work. Plumbers are making crazy money, almost like lawyer type money per hour. Especially here in Las Vegas. And so they have programs that'll like cut your water bill in half if you fix the leak, in a timely manner. And then also too, they'll cover a part of your bill as well for the plumbers too. So I think that's kind of a cool thing they do to incentivize people to fix it so that again, that water doesn't get lost to evaporation.
Okay. Final area where you guys are doing stuff. Is there clever technology or some innovations that you all have in Las Vegas and in Southern Nevada that allows you to save water better than we do?
I think the big thing, honestly, that I've noticed is that a lot of people just aren't recycling at the rate that we are. Now, we're lucky because we're at a stage where like really our population exploded from the 90s on. So we were able to develop around this whole system. But like in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have this recycling system. And so back then they had the foresight to realize like, hey, we're in the desert, water's a limited resource. So we really need to kick up our conservation efforts. And so they really built things up with, the wash in particular that would allow that to add another filtration process into it. So you need to have space if you're going to be able to do something like that. I think it was like tens of millions of dollars that went into creating this wash that had already dried up. And now it's this really awesome, set of trail systems built around this stream that is part of our whole water system. So that part of it is probably hard for a lot of cities like a Chicago, for instance, to replicate where like, or in DC as well, where space isn't necessarily your friend, right? But the big thing is having these water treatment facilities that have such a robust system to go and filter out these things. And again, we don't have enough time on this podcast to really dive into what exactly that process is, but it goes through that mechanical, biological, and chemical treatment process. And I think that's the big thing.
So you've laid out a whole bunch of different things that you all are doing, from the cops to this technology to the infrastructure of the wash to sort of rules about when you can wash your car, to encouraging people to not have grass, paying them to not have grass, all these different things. Do you know which ones are thought to be most effective and which ones are sort of most costly? I guess I'm trying to think about for other cities, which are the ones that other cities would go to first because they're going to be most effective and least expensive.
Yeah, the most effective one is the war on grass and eliminating that. I mean, they've been able to save billions upon billions of gallons of water per year by eliminating as much grass as they have here in Las Vegas. And so that's something that I think other people can learn from. And a lot of people are really hesitant to give up their lawns. It's kind of funny. It almost seems like that's part of the American dream, white picket fence and, a lush green lawn. But the funny thing, David, is that lawns aren't even an American concept. We brought it over from Great Britain because it was the sprawling estates where the uber wealthy Brits had, luscious lawns and stuff like that.
So we copied it from them. Beautiful grass over there.
Yeah,
beautiful
it's great.
Grass. They have
much
grass
different
courts at
climate
Wimbledon
though, too. Yeah, and that's the thing is like it's a different climate. It's much wetter there versus here in Las Vegas. But I think around the U.S., people can employ more xeriscaping and turf and things like that in the non-essential areas. Again, we're not telling you like get rid of your backyard because like kids play on that. Grass is different than turf. Like I'm not arguing that. The Southern Nevada Water Authority isn't arguing that. Few people are. But in the areas where like the only people that are walking on that grass are the people mowing it, like, is it really useful? Cover it with something else, some other greenery, again, the xeriscaping, or with turf that looks just the same, but doesn't eat up as much water as the other stuff does. Number 2 on the list, and this is kind of irrelevant just with data centers popping up, is evaporative cooling, because that's something a lot of them do. We here in Southern Nevada have banned any new evaporative cooling systems for these data centers as they come along. I know that's a big thing in Virginia. I think it's the hub.
I didn't realize that. So they cool their computers by evaporating water off of them?
Essentially, yeah. So like, making, I would say for citizens, like voting to make sure it gets passed to where they can't use those, because that is such a big waste of water. Again, number 2 on the list, right behind landscaping and things like that. So I would say like use your power as a voter to be like, hey, these data centers need to get rid of evaporative cooling in order to help save more water. And I think if you attack your grass and you do that as well with the evaporative cooling, like that's going to make a massive difference.
Have other desert cities followed Vegas's lead? Or
They have.
is Phoenix and you know, are they doing things?
Not to the extent that we have. There's a study from UCLA that analyzed like water recycling and stuff like that. So like here in Las Vegas, according to this study, we're able to recycle a total of 85% of our water, whereas in other places like Arizona, it's 52% of their water that's recycled. So a pretty big gap from us to Arizona. They're number 2 on the list. Then it really starts shrinking a ton. We talked about those other states, you know, that are in the kind of Colorado River Pact there that use it. California only recycles 22% of their water. New Mexico, 18%. Colorado, 3.6%. Wyoming, 3.4%. It's crazy. But it gets worse. Wait till we get to Utah. Utah recycles less than 1% of their water. And I've been through parts of Utah that are just as deserty as we are here in Nevada. So they need to get on board. And because we're part of the lower basin with Arizona and California, we've been working with them a lot more, and they've been willing to adopt more of these things. Down in Southern California, again, they're exploring desalination, which would be another way to kind of reinsert some more water into the system. And on top of that, we're also helping Southern California invest in similar water recycling plants as well. I think the number that I saw thrown out there was that we're helping invest about $750 million into a similar type of thing that would allow them to recycle more water, which again helps everyone involved.
So I was reading somewhere, I think that the Colorado River is having maybe its worst year ever for runoff. You had such a low snowpack, so little snow. Is Vegas in trouble if the Colorado continues to suffer from the drought?
We could be, but the cool thing is like, so I talked about the allocation of like how much water we're allowed. We used to be allowed 300,000 acre feet. Now it's being dropped down because of recent cuts from the federal government to 270,000 acre feet. Last year, for some perspective, we only used 198,000 acre feet. So we're still way under the allotment that's afforded to us. So we're doing really good in that regard. Like we've been able to squeeze more out of less. So it's not this like dire situation, but to your point of the snowpack and everything like that, the worst year on record, I think, was 2002, if memory serves me right. And we're getting close to a lot of those. Like this is going to be some of the lowest water levels we've seen in Lake Mead since they built it and filled it up initially. So that alone is kind of jarring. But the good thing is we do have enough resources built up and saved in terms of water that's banked and everything like that, to where I'm told from representatives over at the SNWA that we would be okay for about 10 years without having access to Lake Mead. So we've got like a decade-long buffer to figure it out.
So last question on the main segment here, Jesse. What can Your City Could Be Better listeners who don't live in Vegas do to make their city better by learning from Vegas?
Yeah. First and foremost, like we said, get rid of grass. I mean, that is the biggest, water waster there is, and as great as it is to look at out front, like, you can make that change. And then too, it just makes it easier. It's less upkeep, at your home and stuff. Outside of that too, again, use your voting power to really push, your local government and even just government statewide, all that different stuff, to go and kind of get ahead of the problem, because we know the climate's changing, and that's not unique to here on the West. Like it's getting hotter everywhere, seemingly. So you need to kind of get ahead of it. Don't wait till it's already an issue. Yes, okay, if you're in an area where you have access to the Great Lakes, or the Mississippi, all those different things, you might be in a good place now, but maybe your kids won't be, whatever it is. So push people to have a better water policy in place. And I think that begins with having more infrastructure to be able to recycle more of your water, because again, that's what's kind of helped us use so much little water. Again, when you note the fact that we have like 2.8 million people here and we only used 198,000 acre feet this year, that's a crazy number to wrap your head around. So by recycling water, you can make a massive difference. So that to me would be the thing, is really push for more recycling of water.
That was a super fun topic, but we're going to have another fun topic, our word on the street, our word on the strip segment. Ooh. So I live in DC, and the tourist business of DC is museums. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I end up going to a lot of museums because A, whenever anyone comes to visit, you take them to a museum. And B, it's just like an activity that exists in DC that DC does really well. There are lots of amazing free museums I can go to. Everyone goes to museums. In Nashville, if you go to Nashville, people listen to a lot of live music because there's so much live music. In Denver, like people actually go out and hike more because there's all this hiking that is accessible. So in fact, like the cliche of your town is sometimes in fact the thing that people do. So what I wonder is, for you, how much pressure in Vegas is there to go to casinos and gamble? That's the city's business. Like in the way that a museum is DC's business or the theater is New York business. Do you meet people for a drink and let's play some blackjack?
We try, honestly, to avoid the Strip as much as possible. Like, that's one of the main things us as locals do, is complain about the Strip and how it's not affordable anymore and that they forgot about locals. So we don't go down there and gamble. Having said that, Vegas has exploded as a food and drink / obviously entertainment city. So, there's plenty of times, like on a date night, or if somebody cool is in town, like you go down to the Strip because you want to catch it because that's where they're going to be. So I constantly will be going down there for dinners or just even grab some cocktails at some of the really cool bars because they spend a lot of money, in making it a very attractive option. So we'll do that a lot. But I've lived in Las Vegas since 2019. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've gambled. And guess how many times it was my own money? 0 times. I am not spending my own money at a casino.
But do you think you're unusual in that way? Do you have friends who are like, oh, let's go gamble? Or no? Nobody
Not in my friend group. That's not something I've had very often. And other friends of mine, I mean, maybe it's like a once a year thing, maybe you got a bonus, you'll go do it, but it's not like a regular activity for us, because I just think we are more, aware of like the fact that the house always wins, so like we know when you go down there, you're not gambling, you're losing. And as Las Vegas locals, like we don't want to lose money and continue to do it. Like we'll leave that to the tourists. So our biggest thing is like when we do go down to the Strip, it's very much so enjoying the restaurants or the different experiences that have popped up around there.
Yeah. Jesse Merrick, host of CityCast Las Vegas. Thanks for coming on Your City Could Be Better. You should listen to Jesse every weekday on CityCast Las Vegas.
Yeah, thanks, David. That was a lot of fun.
That's all for today's episode of Your City Could Be Better. I'm your host, David Plotz. Our producers today were Lizzie Goldsmith, Arya Bracci, Priyanka Tilve, Jesse Merrick, and Layla Muhammad. Our music is by Carl Christensen. If you are enjoying this show, please tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Maybe you get your podcasts by a wonderful pool in Vegas. Maybe you get your podcasts surrounded by cactus and at your xeriscaped front yard. We will be back next week with another conversation about how your city could be better.